Grotmas one and all! The Red Gobbo's here again, throwing snowball grenades, stealing loot and making a snowman with a little bit of help from his assistant. But that snowman isn't all it seems. It's an abominable snowman. In this festive painting guide for beginners, I'll teach you how to build and paint your very own. So don't worry if this is your first Warhammer model ever. Let's get stuck in and then stuck into some mince pies. But first we need to make sure we got all our tools and painting area set up. This can be super quick and easy, but it is really important. So our table is protected, let's cover it up. Some paper or a cutting mat will do. For building, we'll need our cutters, mould line remover and plastic glue. If you're under the age of 16, please ask a responsible adult to help you with the gluing steps. Right, now we have our tools ready, we can get building. This fantastic model has a few different parts. The snowman with his removable head, the grot assistant and the Red Gobbo himself. When building your model, it's best to read the construction guide first before cutting anything off. All the pieces are numbered and have an order that we build each section. In the guide, part 1 is the Red Gobbo's top half. Now let's look at the frame and see the piece we need to cut out. If we take the flat side of the cutters against the piece and gently squeeze, we get a nice clean cut. Then we can repeat that for all the connectors, so that we can free our piece. Then we can find part 2 and 3, which are his little legs, and cut those out too. Don't worry if there's a little amount of the frame still on our pieces. We can use our mould line remover and scrape those unwanted bits off gently. We can also remove any mould lines that you can see on some of the parts of the model too. Now those parts are cut out and cleaned up nicely, we can glue the parts together. In the guide there is a yellow area. This is where we apply a small amount of the plastic glue, then stick our legs together. Just give it a little bit of time to dry before moving on. And now we can go to the next step and stick the top half of the Red Gobbo. The blue area just shows the previous step, just to make sure we are assembling it in the right order. Great stuff! Now you have those basics down, you can keep following the guide and finish off the Red Gobbo, his assistant and the snowman. Just remember not to glue the snowman's head down, as you can have the option of 2 heads, the smiley top hat head or the top of the bomb itself. We'll just use some sticky tack to hold them down when painting. And to finish building our festive scene, we'll glue down our cheeky trio to the snowy sculpted base. Now our model is looking nice, it's ready for some paint. In this section, I'll teach you how to undercoat your model and get some amazing colours applied in no time. Instead of our building tools, we'll be needing some clean water in a cup or our trusty water pot, one of our palettes or some paper for our paints, and some paper towel for drying our brushes and clearing up any little spillages. You can also use a painting handle if you have access to one, but it's not necessary. Even if you're a beginner painter or a hobby veteran, we can't forget the most important part, a list of the paints and brushes we'll be using. We won't be needing too many, just enough festive colours for our cheeky trio. Now we can start having fun with our colours. Undercoating your models is the best way to make sure your colours stay put. For our lovely snowy theme, we'll use Corax White. As a beginner, using base paints is a great way to start learning with a couple of simple steps. Step 1. Give your base paint a good shake before opening it. This makes sure that all of the pigments are evenly mixed in the paint. Then you can open the pot until the tab at the back clicks, keeping the pot open. Step 2. Grab your medium base STC brush. Pop it in the reservoir in the back of the lid and get some of our paint out and onto our palette. This makes sure that we don't have too much on our brush when applying it to the model. Just halfway of the brush hairs is plenty. Step 3. Start painting. We want to make sure that we can get one coat down all over our model, avoiding brushing over the areas we just painted. We want to make sure that we get a smooth finish, so if you need more paint, just repeat step 2 again. Don't worry if it looks a little patchy or isn't taken to the plastic just yet. With your first coat down, we need to leave it to fully dry. This could take around 5 to 10 minutes, so make sure you clean off your brush to avoid any dried paint in the hairs, and grab a hot drink and another mince pie. Step 4. After the coat is dried, we can apply a second or a third coat if needed, just to cover any patches missed with the first coat. This is why it's important to make sure that our paint is smooth from the pot, so we get the coverage with a smooth finish for painting. And our festive trio and their base should look something like this. A solid white coat of paint. For our first colour on our mischievous trio, we'll be using Black Templar, which is a contrast paint. Contrast paints are very pigmented but thin paints. To use contrast paints, give them a good shake and open them, just like with our base paint. We don't need to add any to our palette, but if you find you have too much contrast on your brush, you can remove it onto the palette or back into the pot. Then we can apply it to the areas we want. In this case, we want to use Black Templar using a medium layer brush on the Red Gobbo's boots, leather straps, the snowman's hat and the lumps of coal. We'll also paint the inside of the mouths on our cheeky grots and the smoke on the snowball. We can also paint the rim of the base too, so it has a nice solid black colour to it. 2 coats should do it. As this is a thin paint, it shouldn't take too long to dry. We just want to keep an eye on any unwanted pooling in recesses, as it can lead to an uneven finish or run into other areas. If you find any pooling, just take your brush and dry it off on your paper towel. Then dab the brush into the area to remove it. Don't worry if you make a bit of a mess. I'll talk about fixing those later. But once you're happy with your colour and it's dried, then we can clean off our brush and then move to our next colour. Our second contrast is Wildwood, and we'll be painting the Red Gobbo's trousers and the snowman's branches, using the same technique as before. Just take your time and make sure you don't get any of the wildwood on any of the snowy parts of the model, like the snowman's body and the base. Just one smooth coat will be plenty, and after it's dried we can paint some green parts next. Our helpful assistant has his little hat and tunic, so we'll use orc flesh for these. Keep using that medium layer brush, and just make sure once you are finished with it, you clean it well and dry it off. Don't worry if you make a mistake too, wait for the contrast to fully dry, then take some Corax white and carefully cover the area. We don't want to apply too much as it will leave streaks in the paint. You can also thin the base paint down with a little drop of water, so it's lighter in the application and you can apply a few coats to cover. Both ways are really effective, so pick what suits you best. It's looking awesome already, so let's keep going. Next we'll use Blood Angel's Red for the Red Gobbo's hat and coat. We'll also use this for some baubles on the base, our assistant's trousers and the star on his hat, and the clock around the back of the base, the snowman's hat band, and if you're feeling extra festive, some stripes on the candy cane and the bomb top. Wow, that's a lot of details, so take your time, making sure you give your red enough drying time and watch out for any unwanted pooling. Great stuff so far! The Red Gobbo has some parchment and his little helper has some string on his hat. So we'll use snakebite leather to paint those quickly. Seeing you've built some painting experience, this should be a doddle. The more you paint, the better you will be at it. Now we need to give the skin a nice green tone. So we'll be applying gut ripper flesh to the Red Gobbo and his assistant. Remember to get all the fingers you can see, and keep the furry parts of the clothes and his beard still in white. You can always tidy up once the contrast is dried. And with that applied, let's get on to the blue. And our final contrast paint is Frost Heart, and we'll paint the remaining baubles and the Red Gobbo's goggles. This is a super quick step, but by taking your time really helps keep everything neat. And with that, all our contrasts are down and looking great. It's a fantastic way to get colours on your models. So now we can add some really shiny metals with some base paints. For our shiny silver, we'll use Iron Hand Steel. We'll prepare our base paints in a similar way to our undercoat step. But once our paint is on our palette, we'll add a small amount of water so we can just apply a couple of coats to our model. We'll apply our first coat to the bomb parts that surround the stripes and the fins on the bottom of the snowman. The Red Gobbo's belt buckle, bullets, goggles, grenades, gun, and there's even a ticking clock around the back of the snowman. Just make sure you leave the first coat to fully dry, and then you can apply a second coat so we get a lovely, solid, shiny colour. Now we can add some gold details with Retributor armour. We'll paint the icon on the snowman's hat alongside the tooth on the left side. Then we'll paint the stars on the Red Gobbo and the smaller light bulbs on the hat and around the back of the model. Follow the same techniques as the silver with a couple of thinned coats. Once you're happy with your metallic colours, it's best to change our paint water. As you can see, it's got a lot of shiny bits mixed up into it. Now we don't get any shiny flakes onto our brush and mix them into our last few paints. Our last few paints are shade paints. They are similar to contrast paints, except they add shadows into the recesses rather than colour the whole area. They come in different colours, so our first one is Norn Oil, a black shade paint. For this step, we'll use a medium shade brush, gently dipping it into our shaken and open pot just like our contrast paints. Then we can apply it to our red, dark green, brown and metallic details. Just like the contrast paints, we need to avoid any unwanted pooling, so you can soak it up in exactly the same way. Once it's dry, you can see the shadows added into those details, and it's given it more dimension and taken away any flat areas. And now we have our last paint to apply. And the finishing touch is using a light shade of Soul Blight Grey over the snowy details and any fur found under Red Gobbo's coat, hat and his little helper's hat too. This colour will give our snow a light shadow and colour over the Corax white undercoat, giving it a little bit more life. And with that last paint, our snowy festive miniature is now finished, and you've learned all the basics of painting Warhammer too. The Red Gobbo and his assistant will get up to all sorts of mischief. They're going to have a blast. But remember, Warhammer is not just for Grotmas. There are so many ways you can continue your Warhammer journey. We have lots of helpful videos on our YouTube channel for all your painting needs. But if you prefer to learn in person, why not visit one of our many Warhammer stores around the world? Well, we hope you enjoyed this painting video today, and we wish you a very Merry Grotmas. Bye bye!